Okay, so we're here for the second last panel of this stage. And it's again going to be another interesting conversation about DePIN, Web3 and operator economy. So we've got three interesting speakers and also an interesting moderator for this panel. I'm going to introduce the speakers. It's going to be Tim Kravchunovsky from Chirp, the CEO. You can come on stage, choose your seat. We've also got Mark Rydon from Aethir, co-founder. And finally, we've got Amit Mehra from Borderless Capital, partner. And of course, this panel will be moderated by Ivo Entchev from Youbi Capital, partner. Amazing. I hope you guys enjoyed this session. I give this mic to, I think you have one. I'll give this to Amit. Good luck, guys.
All right. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Congratulations on making the second last panel of Proof of Talk here on the second day, the last day of the conference. We have an interesting topic, DePIN and the Web3 operator economy. Who here has heard about the operator economy? Hand up. Few people. All right. So Airbnb, Uber, the idea of contributing your private hardware and labor to a decentralized business model, which has proved very successful in Web 2. One of the things we're going to suggest on the panel today is that DePIN can be seen as an iteration of that business model and perhaps an improvement as well. My name is Ivo Entchev. Youbi Capital is a Web3 fund and accelerator. We invest across a range of things, mostly geared towards mass adoption and consumer. One thing I will say about DePIN is that we do see it as a consumer-facing innovation, especially in the sense of giving birth to a new persona, which you might call the consumer producer. We talk about creating tools, but the tools also create us, and that is partly what's happening with DePIN. So we're going to jump right into it, and I'm going to ask the other speakers to please introduce themselves, beginning with Amit.
Sure. Thanks, Ivo. So, hey guys, I'm Amit. I'm a partner with Borderless Capital. We are a Web3 VC fund, been in the space for a while, since 2018, over 300 companies in the portfolio now, currently deploying from our 7th and 8th funds. We have 3 funds which are active. One is focused on interoperability. We have a fund focused just on DePIN. We are one of the very unique VCs to have that. And then we have a liquid fund as well. Specifically on the DePIN side, we started investing back in 2018, started with Helium, and then from there expanded to the broader DePIN space. So all the key, some of the key DePIN projects, we are very honored to be on the cap table, be working with them, like Demo, Hivemapper, Polin, Mawari, GeoNet, Uprock, and a bunch of others. So really excited about how this space is panning out and excited to speak on this.
Cool, yeah, Mark here, founder of Aethir. At Aethir, we build distributed enterprise-grade GPU infrastructure for gaming and AI companies. What makes us a little bit different to maybe other DePINs in the compute space is that Aethir's infrastructure is 100% enterprise-grade, right? So every GPU that's connected to our network is sitting in a data center or connected through enterprise-grade network infrastructure. We have now roughly 43,000 GPUs contributed to our infrastructure from all over the world. And in particular, we have the largest commitment of H100 GPUs. These are the NVIDIA flagship chipset for AI training and inferencing, with around 5,000 of those high-performance chips contributed to our network.
Hi, my name is Tim Kravchunovsky. I'm founder of Chirp. We're building a decentralized wireless network and an ecosystem for IoT that essentially gives all of the tools necessary for the projects to implement IoT infrastructure, be it RWA or DePIN infrastructure. So.
All right, awesome. I want to start with the basics here. DePIN is a term that was coined by Messari in 2023. It's a bit of a rebrand. It's very recent. Certainly, the notion of using tokenized incentives to coordinate hardware is not new, right? You might even say it goes all the way back to Bitcoin, where people contribute their private compute in order to secure a distributed ledger, right? So over time, this category has existed in spurts and stops. Some of what we consider now the OGs of DePIN, like Helium and Filecoin, go back to 2013, 2017. So Amit, I want to start with you. Just from an investor perspective, you've now had 3 funds, essentially, 2 that I think are complete, and you're on your 3rd so-called DePIN fund. You were doing DePIN before it was cool and before it was even called DePIN. Can you give us a sense of how the space has evolved over time, how we got here, and why all the attention, all the traction and excitement about DePIN right now?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the key things is, DePIN is very retail consumer focused. You actually can see it, feel it. And I think with the recent adoption of the Bitcoin ETF, ETH ETF, like a lot of real Web2 money kind of coming into Bitcoin, coming into Web3, I think that was to some extent a little bit of impetus on, okay, this is real now, right? And this is where Web3 kind of meets the real world. So that has a little bit of, that narrative has a little bit of play on why I think, people are just starting to realize, okay, the power of DePIN. And I think the way we have seen the space evolve is, as you mentioned, like Helium, Filecoin, some of the OGs, and from there, kind of, we just launched a paper called DePIN Thesis 2.0. I would encourage, if you guys are interested, to go and take a look. And we basically have categorized it as like in high level into 2 categories. One is bespoke DePIN, where you need like companies like GeoNet, where you need some specific hardware to participate in the network. So you need an antenna, for example, for Planet Watch or Ambient, you need an antenna, or you need a particular sensor that you need to participate in the network. And then commodity DePIN, which is where you can just use your smartphone like Natix or Hivemapper and start participating in it. And that's one kind of lens of you can categorize and see it evolve. And when there are very different ways in how each of these ecosystems then evolves. There are pros and cons of each. It's a long debate, but that's at a high level how we are viewing it.
Yeah, so Mark, maybe you want to take that. You're on the bleeding edge of DePIN, more on the specialized, customized device, highly specialized because they're GPUs. How do you see the present moment, and is the hype justified?
Yeah, definitely. I think DePIN is an interesting narrative, right? Because it's so familiar to the majority of people in crypto. And I think it's the familiarity that's driving a part of the resurgence, right? This rebranding of kind of proof of work ecosystems in some way is something that's very, like you mentioned, retail friendly. I think also there's a kind of macroeconomic reasoning here as well, right? I think that VCs have more capital in crypto now than they've ever had before, right? Projects, good quality projects, are raising later and later rounds, right? They're going public later and later, right? So these opportunities for retail to get in and get their 10x, their 100x, their 1000x opportunities, which were somewhat present in previous cycles, are less and less apparent in today's sort of crypto market. And I think this is, most obviously driving a massive amount of interest in meme coins, right? People see those as being far less VC-centric, far more organic, and the opportunity for that big return, right, is there. And then, retail's very, very interested in that. But this retail element, this consumer element of DePIN, right, the ability to not just have to buy into a token, after VCs have kind of extracted all of the kind of multiples, this ability to kind of contribute hardware and earn tokens as opposed to investing, I think is also an attractive narrative, for retail, who I think are feeling quite excluded from today's kind of crypto market.
That's a great answer. So maybe Tim, turning to you, and maybe putting aside kind of the financial appeal, that now we're familiar with the freelancer economy. People are maybe used to having side hustles, finding ways to earn money on the side, even passively now, with some of these DePIN devices. Maybe we can just turn a little bit on the technical level. has something changed drastically or accelerated drastically in the last few years that is really making this category more viable? You know, people I speak with who are not VCs necessarily, and VCs are very excited, understandably, and I mean, I'm sure we'll echo that. You know, they have concerns that maybe the tech is not quite as advanced as we claim it to be. So can you maybe give us a sense, maybe in your specific area of DePIN, IoT, what you see as the big advancements and what maybe is left to be done on the technical side?
So what Chirp is doing is we're implementing essentially a network for IoT. So think of it as decentralized telecom. And decentralized telecom, we're giving the community, we're giving them a chance to participate in something that they were not able to participate before. So if you wanted to start a telecom company, it requires multi-million-dollar investments. So in here, with Chirp and with DePIN and DY, so it's decentralized wireless, people actually buy the antennas, they mount them on their houses, and they earn them crypto. So in here, like Amit said, it's something that they can feel, something that they can relate to, and they see the real use cases. So from the technical perspective, I mean, it's unbelievable for a centralized telecom company to expand in multiple countries. And that's why when you typically look at telecoms, they typically operate in only one country, because it's very, very difficult from the technical perspective to spread the network. In here, the entire physical infrastructure is owned by the community. It is installed by the community. And we're just handling the back end where you can seamlessly connect the antennas to the network. So in here, this is a major advancement, and obviously, you know, Helium was the front runner on this. We're improving on the model, and we're taking it further. But essentially, we have deployed our network in 33 countries in just 3 months. It is unprecedented, and it's something that you will never see in traditional telecom. It's physically not possible. So.
Interesting, and maybe just you know, bridging that to the focus of the panel, or the attempt to intersect DePIN with the Web2 operator economy first, and maybe suggest that we're iterating that model. Mark, if I can ask you, when you think of some of these DePIN networks and the business model that they put forward, do you think of them primarily as complementary or as disruptive? Of the existing businesses, and what are the specific, I guess, properties of crypto that you think are really necessary here and really add to what Web2 is already doing?
I think it's a difficult question. DePIN is such a broad topic, right? And it can get pretty weird. Right, there's decentralized toilets, right? There's a whole bunch of strange DePINs out there, so it's difficult to kind of maybe to wrap them up. But certainly when we look at Aethir, what we do, right? Portions of our business are definitely disruptive, right? So when we look at the high performance compute contribution that we make to the kind of the global compute demand economy, right? That's disruptive, right? Because we're taking hardware that is directly being applied elsewhere, right, and redistributing it or offering an alternative within our network. So I think there are elements of DePIN that have to be disruptive, but I think the really interesting parts about DePIN is where you get the opportunity to be kind of complementary, right? Do things like Chirp was talking about. Do things that are very, very difficult for traditional models and centralized models to do. And you kind of bring the advantages of the blockchain, the advantages of decentralization into that world in a way that makes these kind of these new avenues interesting and available. We have a product called Aethir Edge, right? It's a consumer mining or compute device. Essentially, a user can buy it. We partner with Qualcomm, right? It's got their latest AI inferencing chip inside. And effectively, it gives the users in our network the ability to operate a node, right, on what, from an infrastructure perspective, we would call the edge, right? Edge computing, traditionally, it's almost a dirty word now, right? Because it's been so difficult to achieve, so expensive to achieve, and the use cases where it's viable to build, large, full-scale, infrastructure-suitable edge networks are so few and far between. But what we're able to do within the kind of context of DePIN, right, is create mechanisms to standardize compute at the edge, right? You see a lot of projects that are trying to pull in consumer compute, right? The difficulty with consumer compute is the variety, the heterogeneity of all the compute that exists out there on the edge. So with a DePIN, with Aethir Edge, we're able to kind of take this product, distribute it through kind of retail mechanisms, selling this device out there, and then we're able to create this standardized edge infrastructure layer that we can actively use to push, latency sensitive compute out in a way that kind of gives us this very, very interesting enterprise product. So it's a complementary angle, right? I think because it's not something that centralized providers can natively do, but I don't think we can exist as a business without kind of having avenues of kind of direct competition.
So Amit, from an investment perspective, I guess, Mark just mentioned that being complementary is better from a competition point of view. You're not trying to take somebody out. You're actually trying to, I guess, expand the supply in their existing business and service their existing customers. How do you think about investing in DePIN? I guess both the commodity DePIN that you mentioned and the bespoke DePIN that Mark's business is in. How do you think about, I guess, de-risking those investments and ensuring that you have the quality, the reliability, and also the full benefit on the demand side when you invest?
Yeah, I think that's a very critical point. I think one of the things that we have seen the projects that have been successful and maybe not as successful is usually if there is an issue on the supply side, like, to be honest, you are not even in the game. Like, to get into the game, you need to have a very strong supply side. Already suppliers are there. The real game is actually on the demand side. Like, how do you generate demand for this, right? And depending upon the kind of project you are, so maybe I'll take an example of one project which I personally love called GeoNet. So what they are doing is, in a lot of applications, there is a need for GPS data. Today, GPS data is like accurate to like a meter level, but you need like precision agriculture and so on. They need data accuracy for a centimeter level. So what they are doing is, in a decentralized way, improve the accuracy to centimeter level and then provide. So the point is, do you have the demand for that? Do you have people who are willing to pay? You can, of course, make sure that you have suppliers who create the hardware. You can make sure that you have a community, do marketing, do the right tokenomics to get your community. But at the end of the day, is somebody going to, when you generate that data in a decentralized way, is somebody going to actually pay for that data? That's the real sanity check. And so that's one thing which I think that we really look at is how strong is the demand once the basic supply and all checks are done. So.
I guess, Tim, how do you think about the demand on your side in your neck of the woods?
So it's obviously a concern, and for a lot of investors, and we spoke to a lot of investors over the 2.5 years that we were building, but this is precisely what we're trying to solve and fix. Because the IoT space is incredibly broken. It is very difficult to onboard devices. You have to have technical knowledge if you want to onboard IoT devices. It's very cumbersome, and so I was actually reading on the internet this guy who was automating his house. He had 10 different proprietary applications that he was using to automate his home. And the story repeats for commercial use cases. So for commercial use cases, there's a study that you actually need to attract up to 18 different vendors if you want to roll out a single IoT solution commercially. So in here, this just shows you that there's, it's not an easy entry into IoT, and this is precisely what we're solving. So we're actually not going from the supply side, we're not going from the antennas and spreading out the antennas all over the world that nobody's going to be using. We're tackling it from the demand side. So from the demand side, we're building all of the infrastructure, we're building everything for all of those projects that are building right now, because like RWA, DePIN, it's a very hot topic. And essentially, over the last month, we have been speaking to a lot of projects that are deploying real sensors. It could be projects that are building, you know, like decentralized ride-sharing companies. So all of those real-world assets, majority of them require some type of connectivity. It's an IoT device if it connects to the internet. And so what we're doing is we're giving those companies that are building something with real-world assets easy, fast go-to-market. So they can just not think about the IoT. They can not think, how am I going to implement the device? I mean, like the space is so broken. You can literally, if you're implementing something that, well, let's take like a humidity sensor. A humidity sensor just transmits humidity, and that's it. But if you take a humidity sensor from 5 different manufacturers, all of those manufacturers, they provide those devices, and they're meant to talk only to their proprietary app. So if you want to build an application that takes a reading from all of those devices, you actually have to go on every device, and you have to modify the code. So it's very difficult and very cumbersome. So we're doing like a data normalization engine where you can take 100 different humidity sensors, and you will get normalized data at the end. So, and that's scalability. So that's what we're doing. So we're going from totally different angle.
Got it.
Yeah, this mic is always more sensitive than I anticipate. Something I think that DePIN struggled with, to be honest, for a while is the demand side, right? We're generally far better at the supply side than the demand side. I mean, you referenced Messari coining the DePIN term last year. They also did a great report, right? The Messari State of DePIN report. And it was quite astounding to me as a builder in the DePIN space to see some of the figures that they were quoting, right? You had, at the time, this was at the end of 2023, I think, or the beginning of this year that they released a report, and you had a $20 billion FDV for all DePIN projects across the Web3 ecosystem. And of that 20 billion, combined annual recurring revenue for that 20 billion FDV was only 15 million, right? That's a massive kind of disconnect, you know, from a value perspective. I think, to be honest, when I look at DePIN as a sector now, I think the use cases that I feel have far better kind of demand legs, right? Are these use cases that have more of a bespoke hardware component, right? Because you can only do so much with consumer hardware and turn it into something that's useful for enterprise, right? And until DePIN can really start tapping into enterprise demand, we're going to struggle to generate, you know, real meaningful revenues.
No, that makes complete sense. And just staying with the demand side in compute, when you started Aethir, you know, again, it's an enterprise, you know, platform for GPUs that services gaming primarily, and entertainment kind of use cases. AI wasn't really a thing, right? It was kind of still a glimmer in our eye, somewhat of a laughingstock in tech still. But your timing has been, in a way, impeccable. And all of a sudden, we're in a world where not only is AI more prevalent, but we are actively talking about decentralized AI and what role crypto has to play in that space. Can you talk a little bit about how you see that intersection between DePIN and AI more broadly, but also more specifically with respect to compute?
Yeah, I think when you look at the AI sector, I think there's a natural overlap between kind of DePIN and AI. Maybe one way to look at this more specifically to Aethir, right, is the problem that we address in the market, right? You've probably heard that there is a global GPU compute shortage, right? You've seen people like Elon Musk come out and say things like GPUs are harder to buy than drugs, right? You would have heard Mark Zuckerberg came out and bought almost $11 billion, $11 billion, what was it? Sorry, I can't remember, a significant amount of H100s, something in the region of like 500,000 H100s just a couple of months ago, right? It is increasingly difficult for kind of small and medium-sized enterprises and startups to get access to this kind of critical compute. And that's for a number of different reasons, but it doesn't look like that challenge is going away anytime soon, right? So something that we look at in particular, right, is actually how efficient are markets at managing these specific resources, right? How well are these GPUs managed across this compute ecosystem? And what we realized was that actually they're managed really, really poorly, right? Utilization rates for high-performance compute infrastructure outside of hyperscalers, right, generally sit at only 15 to 18%, right? So these are underutilized over 80% of the time. And if you could create infrastructure that was able to kind of aggregate and surface that compute in any meaningful way, you're now redistributing a meaningful amount of supply into the broader compute ecosystem. So I think DePIN has a natural alignment at that kind of enterprise compute layer, right, at its base. But then, when you look to kind of the broader AI ecosystem, right, you start to kind of take into account AI inferencing, right? And AI inferencing is the role of AI doing its job, right? So once it's trained and you're asking a question of ChatGPT-4, right, when it queries its model and gives you an answer, that's inferencing. And that, by definition, is a latency-sensitive task, right? And distributed networks have the potential to offer really interesting solutions to latency-sensitive tasks. It's something that's relevant to Chirp and the IoT ecosystem as well, right? When you look at how distributed compute networks scale compared to centralized compute networks, right? In a centralized compute network, there is always incentive for that compute to cluster together, right? You want to minimize your overhead, you want to have it under one roof, you want to make sure you don't have to have a distributed workforce working across all these different locations. It just makes more economic sense to kind of put as much of that compute as you can in one single location to reduce cost, right? But if you remove the incentive, the economic incentive for compute to clump, right? All of a sudden you have a far more distributed compute environment, right? Whereby as your network grows, the likelihood that you're going to be able to offload a compute task closer to a user is increasing as your network gets bigger, right? So you have this really, really interesting alignment between networks that are able to kind of grow and satisfy more users, but also increasingly perform lower latency tasks, essentially getting better and higher performance as they scale. And this is something that's not necessarily possible within centralized ecosystems. So I think there's a huge amount that distributed networks can provide within the AI ecosystem, even just at that core infrastructure level. And then I guess one final kind of quick point is that there's been a lot of talk in the last maybe 2 weeks in particular about these trillion-dollar compute clusters, right? The expectation of the compute requirements for the kind of rate of change that we're seeing in the LLM ecosystem are such that we're looking at literally not having enough power right, as a globe, right, to satisfy the compute requirements that we're expecting to need within the next kind of 5 years. And that's an interesting scenario whereby if you instead start looking outside of just data centers, outside of these highly power-hungry environments, and instead look at how you can maybe distribute compute, maybe less efficiently, but in a more distributed, smaller way across kind of consumer compute ecosystems or commodity-based compute ecosystems, then you have the opportunity to kind of create alternative, I guess, power structures for how that compute is farmed out. So I think there's a lot of space for DePIN and AI to continue to overlap.
Got it. Amit, do you agree with that? And how has AI influenced your investment thesis, if at all, especially with the last fund?
Yeah, sure. I think, I agree with Mike. I think definitely like latency plays a key, kind of key role in determining, okay, whether it should be decentralized, and it helps. Kind of taking a step back broadly, we think AI plus Web3 plays a very critical role in the DePIN space, and at a very broad level, again, to simplify it, it's very easy to make things complicated, but just to simplify it broadly, you can use AI more on, or you can use, you can think of AI plus Web3 from an infrastructure point of view, where there is this huge, as Mike was saying, compute power which is needed, and you are using, kind of Web3 incentives to see how you can use the decentralized compute power, maybe from huge data centers, which, Aethir, Render, and others are doing, or maybe even from, the unused compute power which people have on their, kind of phones or, home devices and so on. So that's on the infra side. And on the other side, there is also an angle where you have these huge models that have to be trained to identify data. And it could be relational models, it could be vector models. And so one of the best way to incentivize data labeling for AI agents and all, or for LLM models that need, is in a decentralized way. So you have people like who are sitting in Philippines, Thailand, and they just play a game where they're basically recognizing images, and at the back end, and they get incentivized via tokens, and the LLM model is learning to identify and gets better and better. So we have done a few investments there as well, like Fraction AI, OpenDB, which is more on, Fraction AI, and Bagel, which is using a vector database, and it's kind of acting as a marketplace between AI agents that need their data labeled and data labelers who can provide their data. So that's at a broad way, quite bullish on both, but generally infrastructure, at some point there can be a few players. So I think I think both of them have potential. We have been a little more bullish on the labeling piece of the AI and Web3 player.
All right, we're running short on time, so I want to leave everyone with this last question, which I hope will be a little bit controversial. Looking out, say, 5-10 years from now, which DePIN project, it doesn't have to be consumer DePIN necessarily, but which DePIN project or type of project do you see as being the most successful? That's the first part of the question. And secondly, is there a DePIN category that you think will fail abysmally despite the current enthusiasm? Starting with Tim.
Well, I think it's going to be something that would successfully fractionalize assets. DePIN is primarily decentralized physical infrastructure, so it's a physical item in the real world that belongs to the community. And for example, like if you're building a decentralized ride sharing, you need to place those cars on the streets. So some of those real-world assets, they're very, very expensive. So for example, like if we take a car, it's $50,000. Not a lot of people can start off with $50,000. So I think if there is a project that is successful in fractionalizing those cars into $100 and giving people like lower barrier to entry, then that's going to be the most successful. So.
Is there one that you think will not be successful, or is it a flawed premise?
Just don't say Aethir.
Don't say Aethir.
No, I'm going to refrain from that because I mean, there's a lot of projects, and you know, unfortunately, that's Web3 space. We don't dive deep into the project, and we are fast to judge. So yeah.
Very diplomatic. No, I like it. Mark.
There's something that we're doing in Aethir, and this is probably kind of a lame answer, but it's something that we're doing that I think is really interesting that not a lot of people are kind of focusing on, right? And that is this intersection between AI and real-time rendering compute. If you think about 5 years from now, I think we can all agree that we're going to be communicating with AI in a different way than we do today, right? Right now, our communication with AI is almost exclusively through a chatbot, right? I don't think that's going to be how we're communicating with AI 5 years from now. We're going to be communicating with AI through real-time rendered avatars, right? We're going to be communicating using speech and natural language, right? Whether that's through a customer service agent, right, representing a company, or some personal assistant that sits on your phone that looks like a real person and that has a face that reacts when they talk and has emotion and kind of avoids this uncanny valley situation that I think is potentially so easy for AI to fall into. Now the ability to deliver that infrastructure at scale requires essentially a global cloud gaming network, right? This low latency GPU compute infrastructure that can deliver real-time rendering capability that'll sit on top of that inferencing stack, right? So that technology, that infrastructure doesn't really exist. And that's what Aethir originally started building. We've obviously built out our AI stack, but that particular compute infrastructure, I think, is going to overlap in a very, very interesting way with AI. And I think that we're not seeing a lot being developed there yet. And that's something that I'm very, very bullish for.
Amit?
Yeah. I think maybe with an example, like one thing which I think hope becomes successful and I think which will be successful is natural areas where decentralization does make a lot of sense. So I'll give an example. There's a company we invested in called Wi-Fi Daba, which is basically focused on tier 2, tier 3 cities in India where there is no Wi-Fi, and they are building, they have this, Dabba basically means like a box in Hindi. So they are basically making like Wi-Fi box, which they give to tier 3, tier 4 towns, which, like a retailer, like a local retailer can then have that box, and that provides Wi-Fi. Users pay and get Wi-Fi, and the retailer gets Solana tokens, Dabba tokens, basically. So that's the model. I think more of that, which actually, so that's really where if you see, it's actually Web3 solving with DePIN a real business use case, because it doesn't make sense for the Vodafones of the world to go and target tier 3, tier 4 cities, where the unit cost or the ARPU won't make sense. And something what might fail, I think, is decentralized, DePIN trying to, go into areas where centralization actually makes more sense from a ARPU point of view or from a commercial point of view. So.
Got it. All right. Well, we're out of time. A big thank you to our panelists for an informative panel, and thank you to the audience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to our previous panel. And I think we are almost at the end of the marathon. Wow, so excited to see all of you still here in the room. Okay.